father at the wedding rehearsal dinner. Smirking, he looked at the tycoon and said, "Sir, this is our family failure. We only brought her, so the seating chart looked even." My parents nodded in agreement, my mother adding, "Yes, we don't brag about her. She's just a disappointment." I braced myself for the usual humiliation, keeping my eyes glued to the floor. But instead of laughing, the room went dead silent. I looked up to see the powerful billionaire standing frozen. The wine glass in his hand trembled as he stared at me, his face turning completely pale. He ignored my smug family entirely, took a step toward me, and whispered in a voice filled with absolute shock, "So it's you? This is completely unexpected. I've been looking for you for 2 years." Before we get to that life-changing moment, I'm glad to have you here. You're watching from, so I can see how far my voice has reached. My name is Maya, and at 26 years old, I had officially been wearing the heavy, suffocating title of the family failure for nearly a decade. In my family, love wasn't unconditional. It was a transaction measured strictly by corporate titles, tax brackets, and social standing. My older brother, Julian, who is 29, was the undisputed golden child. He was sharp, cutthroat, and climbed the corporate ladder with the singular purpose of making our parents look good. They worshipped the very ground he walked on. I, on the other hand, was the creative outcast. Because I refused to take a traditional office job and instead spent my 20s quietly working on my laptop from coffee shops, my parents viewed me as a lazy underachiever. They constantly compared my modest life to Julian's brilliant trajectory, using every family dinner to remind me how much of a disappointment I was. I stopped arguing years ago, letting them believe whatever made them feel superior. Then came the announcement that changed everything. Julian had managed to secure an engagement with a high society heiress whose family occupied the topmost tier of the city's wealthy elite. My parents were ecstatic, treating the upcoming marriage like a historic victory that would finally launch our family into the upper echelons of society. They poured all their energy and savings into making sure they looked flawless for the wedding events. As the date approached, their desperate desire to impress the bride's billionaire father meant one thing for me. I was to be pushed even further into the background, hidden away like a dirty secret they couldn't completely erase. I was only invited to keep the seating chart balanced, a prop to be seen and not heard. The luxury venue chosen for the rehearsal dinner was a breathtaking, historic estate in the hills, a place where security guards checked invitations twice before letting anyone pass the iron gates. The air was thick with the scent of expensive floral arrangements, and classical music drifted softly from invisible speakers. My parents and Julian fit right into the opulent setting, wearing designer suits and custom-tailored silk dresses that had cost them a small fortune. They stood tall, practicing their high society smiles in the reflection of the glass doors. I walked a few paces behind them, feeling the harsh sting of their deliberate rejection with every step. To ensure I didn't steal a single shred of the spotlight from Julian, my mother had personally selected my outfit, a cheap, plain navy dress from a clearance rack that was a size too large and completely outdated. As we walked toward the grand dining hall, my father leaned back slightly, his voice dropping to a harsh, venomous whisper meant only for my ears. "Keep your mouth shut tonight, Maya," he warned, his eyes scanning the room instead of looking at me. "Do not speak unless you are spoken to, and do not dare mention your pathetic freelance hobbies to these people. This night is about your brother's future, not your shortcomings." Julian smirked, adjusting his cuffs with supreme arrogance as he added, "Just try to look invisible, Maya. We can't let your lack of ambition ruin the biggest connection this family has ever made." They treated me like an embarrassing stain on their perfect canvas, completely unaware of the storm brewing ahead. The moment of peak humiliation arrived just as the main course was being cleared. My brother Julian spotted the man of the hour, Arthur Sterling, standing near the grand marble fireplace. Arthur was a legendary tech tycoon, a multi-billionaire whose business decisions dictated the flow of entire global markets. Eager to cement his position in his new father-in-law's good graces, Julian grabbed my upper arm with a tight, painful grip and dragged me across the floor, with my parents trailing close behind like desperate, starstruck groupies. When we reached the billionaire, Julian cleared his throat, placing on his most charming, corporate smile. "Mr. Sterling," Julian began, his voice dripping with false confidence as he gestured toward me. "I wanted to introduce you to the final member of our family. This is my sister, Maya. To be perfectly blunt, sir, she is our family failure. We only brought her along tonight, so the seating chart at the table looked even." My mother eagerly chimed in, letting out a synthetic, high-pitched laugh. "Yes, Arthur, we don't brag about her at all. She's just a massive disappointment to the family name." I stood frozen under the blinding chandeliers, my face burning as the cruel words echoed across the room. I braced myself for the usual patronizing looks and mocking laughter from the high society crowd, keeping my eyes glued to the polished floor to hide the tears of anger threatening to spill over. The betrayal cut deep, but I kept my composure, refusing to give them the satisfaction of making me cry in public. But instead of the polite agreement or collective chuckles my family expected, a heavy, suffocating silence suddenly fell over the entire circle. I looked up, confused by the sudden quiet, and what I saw made my breath hitch. Arthur Sterling wasn't laughing. He stood completely frozen, his powerful posture locked tight as his steel-gray eyes locked onto my face. The heavy crystal wine glass in his hand trembled violently, sending ripples through the dark liquid before he abruptly set it down on a passing waiter's tray. The color had completely drained from his face, leaving him looking as pale as marble. Julian and my parents smiled expectantly, totally misreading the situation, waiting for the billionaire to join in on their cruel joke. But Arthur completely ignored them. He took a slow, deliberate step toward me, his intense gaze never wavering, entirely cutting my brother out of the space between us. He reached out a hand, his voice dropping to an absolute whisper that carried the weight of a physical blow. "So, it's you? This is completely unexpected. I've been looking for you for 2 years." My family's smiles instantly shattered. Julian blinked in utter confusion, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. My mother let out a nervous, breathless chuckle. "Arthur, dear, you must be mistaken. This is just Maya. She doesn't know anyone important." Arthur snapped his head toward my mother, his eyes flashing with a cold, terrifying authority that silenced her instantly. "Mistaken," he echoed, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "I am never mistaken. This young woman is the anonymous creative mastermind behind Vanguard Systems. Her proprietary architecture is the entire foundation of my global enterprise." The room gasped, and the world seemed to tilt beneath my family's feet. For the past 2 years, while my family was busy mocking me for staring at a screen in local coffee shops, I had been quietly building a digital empire. Under the professional pseudonym CV Vanguard, I had developed an advanced, proprietary data routing software that solved the biggest efficiency crisis in modern tech. I had deliberately kept my real identity completely hidden behind a private corporate trust, wanting my work to speak for itself without the baggage of my family's constant negativity. Arthur Sterling's massive conglomerate had desperately needed that software to survive a major global transition. When his team couldn't find the creator, they had been forced to license it through my brokers for a staggering 7-figure annual fee. My family thought I was broke, but in reality, I was quietly earning more in a single fiscal quarter than my brother Julian made in 5 years of corporate climbing. I just never bought flashy cars or designer clothes to prove it to them. Arthur turned back to the crowd, gesturing toward me with immense, profound respect. For 24 months, my executive board has tried to track down the genius behind the Vanguard architecture to offer them a full partnership, Arthur announced loudly, ensuring every high society guest in the room could hear him. And to find out that she is standing right here, being insulted by the very people who should be begging for her guidance, is absolutely mind-blowing. Julian's face turned a sickly shade of green as the reality of my hidden wealth and industry dominance crashed down on him. My parents stared at me, their eyes wide with a mixture of profound shock and sudden, terrifying realization. Seeing the multi-billionaire offer me an elite partnership right on the spot, the dynamic in the room shifted instantly. The cruel smirk vanished from Julian's face, replaced by a desperate, panicked sweat. My parents immediately tried to laugh the whole thing off, their voices cracking with sudden, nauseating hypocrisy. "Oh, Arthur, you know how family dynamics are," my father stammered, stepping forward and trying to put a paternal arm around my shoulder. "It was just a playful joke. We are incredibly proud of Maya's achievements. We always knew she had a brilliant mind hidden away." My mother nodded aggressively, her eyes locked onto me with a disgusting mixture of newfound greed and panic. "Yes, exactly. We always pushed her to work hard on her laptop. Her success is a reflection of our family's dedication to excellence." It was pathetic. They were actively trying to rewrite years of emotional abuse and public humiliation just to save their own social standing and get a piece of my hidden empire. But before I could even push my father's hand away, Arthur Sterling stepped firmly between us, his face a mask of absolute disgust. He looked down at Julian and my parents with a cold, piercing gaze that made them instantly flinch. "Do not insult my intelligence," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "I heard exactly how you spoke to her. You didn't brag about her because your own arrogance blinded you to her genius. With superficial parasites who treat true brilliance with such malicious disrespect." Julian looked as if he might vomit right onto the marble floor. I looked at my family one last time, seeing them for exactly what they were: small, desperate people drowning in their own superficiality. I turned to Arthur, matching his confident posture. "Mr. Sterling," I said clearly, ensuring my voice carried across the silent room. "I accept your invitation. Let's discuss that partnership tomorrow morning in your office, away from the noise." Without waiting for a response from my stunned parents or Julian, I turned on my heel and walked out of the grand estate, leaving the family failure label behind forever in the dust of their ruined ambitions. Julian's standing with his new in-laws was completely shattered, and my parents were left to face the high society crowd knowing they had publicly discarded the most successful person they would ever know. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you have done if your family humiliated you right before a massive breakthrough? Meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen two other stories.